I feel like Raptors fans might love this podcast this year because you know what? There's Raptors talk, a lot of Raptors talk, and
Would you say that this is the this is the most highly anticipated Raptors season? Got to be of all time, right?
do you know what, Webby? I'm so glad you said that. And we start with our wrap it up segment, which, as always, is about your Toronto Raptors. And Kawhi Leonard obviously had media day, and that's weird that I just said Kawhi Leonard had his media day. The Raptors had their media day, but all the focus was about Kawhi Leonard. And what you just said, Webby, is a perfect starting point because to me, right, is it crazy to say that this might be the most highly anticipated season in terms of the Raptors making the finals is a realistic goal for the first time in franchise history? And yet that wasn't really the focus of Media Day, was it?
No, of course not. The focus of Media Day is the huge acquisition that the Toronto Raptors made in the offseason because there's so much uncertainty around his future. Mm-hmm. So that's definitely going to be more of your... That's the easy narrative to follow, right?
For sure. But here's the thing that I didn't get, right? Because I felt like everyone was coming in on the same page. We all know that Kawhi doesn't have a long-term plan to stay in Toronto. Now, could that change? Of course. But we know the situation heading in. So therefore, it just seemed like a super weird situation to that he was walking into in terms of he's just going to be asked the same question in different ways over and over and over again. Like, that just seemed weird to me. What was your first impression of the Kawhi Leonard media day? Was it the laugh?
The laugh was, well, the laugh was the viral part, right? But yeah, I don't know. And I guess the laugh plays into it, but it was really how the media in Toronto and the media in Canada is going to react to who Kawhi Leonard is.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a different situation. It's a different scene than he had in San Antonio. And while they were a super successful franchise with Kawhi Leonard at the helm, I don't think that, and I'm not trying to pump Toronto's tires here, but it's a big media market, especially when you compare it to San Antonio. So I think reconciling Kawhi Leonard's personality with the coverage that he's going to get from two national sports networks, basically, rather than a local Fox affiliate and, TNT coming in twice a month, it is going to be kind of a culture shock, not for Kawhi and his people, but also covering an athlete like that for Toronto and Canadian sports media. That's going to be a new thing for them as well. They've never had an athlete like this to cover when it comes to the Raptors.
You know what, Webby? You're totally right with that. Kawhi Leonard is coming in with a lot of different expectations, and the media market is a weird one. And we talk about it a lot on this podcast, just in terms of the way that we cover basketball in Canada and in Toronto especially. But this was super weird. And I'm not just going to blame the Toronto media with this factor because on the one hand, if you went online, you saw that the laugh was everywhere, right? And so everyone's kind of to blame for this standpoint because to me, the one reason it was weird was heading in, Kawhi doesn't show any emotion. Kawhi never smiles. Kawhi never does this. And then the very first question he gets, he laughs, now albeit awkwardly, but that becomes like the viral moment. And I feel like we didn't really give him a chance to acknowledge just how awkward the situation was that he was stepping into, right? Like, it's your first media day. You know that everyone's trying to find out, which makes no sense to me, but everyone's trying to find out, are you going to stay? Are you going to re-sign in Toronto? Right. How do you feel about being in Toronto? And you're being asked these questions by complete strangers that you've never met before. And the setup of the room, it's dark. So you can't even see who's asking you the questions. So you're having strangers hurl questions at you, the same question over and over again. And who wouldn't be awkward in that moment? You know what I mean? Like, that was just a weird situation altogether.
No, yeah, and you're absolutely right. But it kind of goes into what I was saying, too, that this is a foreign situation for him. Because, listen, as much as success as the Spurs had, their media days were never a circus like this. And if there was a lot of coverage, he had the benefit of having a guy like Pop, of having teammates like Manu and Tony Parker, who had been through that role before. But now, especially with DeMar not on the team anymore and Kyle almost I don't even know what to make of Kyle Lowry right now and his relationship with the media. I mean,
Yeah,
this with the situation of Kawhi coming in and his future being up in the air, this was all about him, and the microscope
yeah,
was fixed solely on him. And I'm sure that that's not something that he's really used to.
for sure. And here's a question I have for you, Webby. What is the biggest sport in Canada?
Oh, it's hockey.
And so, if you go by that standpoint, and the most popular athletes in hockey, Connor McDavid, Sidney Crosby, but hockey dudes in general, right? They don't ever say anything. Like, I couldn't tell you one important quote that Sidney Crosby or Connor McDavid have ever said, right?
Right.
But
It's almost and it's almost like the Canadian hockey player is the worst offender in that. Like any good hockey sound bites you get are usually from Russians or Americans.
exactly, right? And what are we told by the Canadian media? We pump the tires of Sidney Crosby and Connor McDavid because they're not all up in the media. They're quiet guys. They're just hard workers. They're
Humble.
hockey players. They're humble. That's what they do. So my question to you is, why was the same Canadian and Toronto media so thrown off by Kawhi Leonard, who's cut from the exact same cloth? Kawhi Leonard just wants to play basketball. That's it. He's a baller. There's nothing else to it. He's not the me guy that wants to be all in the camera and like talk to the media all the time. He's not going to give you an interesting quote on anything, but we know that coming in. So why would we place such a huge factor on what he was going to say in the first place? Like all that talk about, was there going to be a press conference? When is the press conference? All that made no sense to me because we know the kind of guy he is. So if we accept that in hockey, why was it such a big deal for us to understand with Kawhi Leonard?
Well, I'm sure that it's bucking the trend of what you assume a basketball player to be. You assume a basketball player to be a LeBron James, an outspoken person who's going to. I mean, we talk about it all the time on this show about the personality of basketball players coming through not just their play, not just through their social media presence, but by really everything they do. It's all followed by us, by fans across the world. And so to have an NBA star like this who's a little demure and a little more laid back, especially to an audience that definitely probably has some black and white, and I don't mean that in a like a racial way at all, but like
No,
some
gotcha.
not a lot of gray areas when it comes to what basketball players should be, like it is in
Yeah,
Canada. And that's not the fault of Canadians or even Canadian media. It's just almost like a newer sport. It's not quite as
for
ingrained as it
sure.
is in the United States. So to have a guy who doesn't quite fit into that mold of what you think a basketball player is going to be, that's what creates that kind of reaction, I think.
Yeah, it was just odd to me that, we embrace Crosby and McDavid for being those kind of dudes, but Kawhi, we are almost looking at it as a detriment that he was quiet and like, why doesn't he come out and say blank? And it's like, what do you want him to say? Like, were you expecting him to come out in this press conference and announce that he was going to sign an extension with the Raptors? Like, I feel like we all know what this situation is, right?
And it's funny, too, if you look at it the other way, it's like PK Subban kind of still gets crap
Yeah,
for doing the reciprocal only in hockey, right?
yeah,
As an outspoken person, a lot of hockey media members, a lot of especially Montreal Canadiens fans will tell you that well, he was a problem in the locker room because he made it all about himself, and he wasn't like Crosby, he wasn't like McDavid, he didn't keep on the straight and narrow. So it's funny how if you start to step out of that mold of what people think you should be in terms of what sport you're playing, then you really get some backlash.
And you know what's funny about this whole thing? We talked about this last season and even in the podcast we did just after the Kawhi Leonard trade, right? And one of the biggest themes that we kept bringing up was for Toronto Raptors fans and media alike to have better expectations for what their team and what their city is, right? And there was a lot of insecurity about, oh, well, we don't like Kawhi because he doesn't want to stay here. Why doesn't he want to stay here? This, that, and it's like, relax, play out the season,
Yeah.
trust in, and I don't want to say trust the process because that's been
Uh,
co-opted by the Sixers, but you know what
Co-opted,
I mean?
created by Sam Hinkie.
Well, trust in your organization
Yes.
and the blueprint that you're building, right? And we've been stressing that for how long now? And to me, the biggest thing to come out of Raptors Media Day was the quotes from Masai Ujiri, right? Because after maybe the eighth time of someone asking basically the same question to Kawhi and Danny Green about the city of Toronto. And, like, I love that Masai just stepped in and he was like, the narrative, I'm going to read this quote because I thought it was super important for people that missed it. And instead of the stupid laugh that took up most of the headlines, I feel like this Masai quote should have been the actual takeaway for Media Day. But I'm going to read the quote now. He said, and I'm going to emphasize too, he interjected to make sure, like he was just fed up by the questioning. But he said, quote, "The narrative of not wanting to come to this city is gone. I think that's old and we should move past that. Believe in this city. Believe in yourself. We can stop talking about coming to the city or wanting to come to the city. That's old talk. We want to win. We have a privilege and an opportunity to be one of the NBA teams here. That's a huge privilege for us, and it's our jobs here to try and greet these players. It's our jobs to try and sell it to these players here, but we're proud of who we are. We're proud to have these guys. We're proud to have the young guys we have. We're proud of what Kyle and everybody has done here. So let's move past that narrative of wanting to stay here or wanting to come here." Close quote. Masai's a G.
Yeah.
I love Masai Ujiri. He's a G because that's so real to me, no?
No, you're absolutely right. And like for too long, the Raptors narrative around this team was that, they may be the fifth, sixth biggest NBA market, but really you have to look at them like a small market team because nobody's going to want to go there. But you know what they've done in the last 10 years is completely flip that narrative on its head. And I don't think that it starts with Kawhi. I think it started a while ago, even before Masai got here. When they were able to, just the way they've built this team throughout the last kind of decade and really built Toronto into not just a good NBA team, but an NBA team that can make the playoffs and win a couple rounds. Now, can they make the finals this year? I think they have a really good shot, and that's definitely going to go a whole lot further to helping that cause as well. But I think that he's right. The media has to get over this like we say, narrative of not being able to bring anybody to Toronto. I think it's false. I think this is a huge NBA market, and it's proven to be a winner.
Also, too, right? Like, you would think that narrative would have died down after Lowry and DeMar became all-stars and they both re-upped.
Yeah.
Right? Like, shouldn't that have started to change that narrative a little bit? And it still seems that we're coming from this place of insecurity. Like, why doesn't he want to be here? Well, maybe, you know what? And I know I'm jumping ahead to this season and who knows what happens, but I'm saying maybe if the Raptors have a great season, right? Let's say they, make it to the conference finals and lose, but it was a good season. And Kawhi Leonard decides that he doesn't want to stay here. Maybe that's on him.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? And it's not on the Toronto Raptors.
And he's completely he's completely within his right to do so as well. Exactly. And just because he does doesn't mean that the Raptors are trash,
Exactly. I totally agree with you, Webby. But again, the biggest thing that should have came out of this was championship expectations, getting two guys from the San Antonio Spurs, and we know how just legendary that franchise is, that organization, and getting those two guys and being able to almost like pick the brains or have the young guys learn from people coming from that pedigree, that's going to be massive going forward, even if it is just for 1 year. And this year is going to be amazing. I can't wait for the Raptors season to start. Preseason starts on Saturday, I'm pretty sure. In Vancouver, they're playing the Portland Trail Blazers.
Nice.
And, I mean, I'm all in. And normally I don't care about preseason, and I really don't care because I know, like, how much is Kawhi really going to play?
I would hope not a lot.
Exactly. But I'm here for it, right? I want to see what's going to happen. The other big storyline, too, is Nick Nurse, right? Like, that's another massive storyline that is getting swept under the rug so far. Brand new coach with a team that has expectations of making the conference finals. Like, I'm interested to see how Nick Nurse does, right, Webby?
Oh, it's going to be, it's going to be a very interesting experiment. I think that, honestly, having Nurse with his first year with a new player like Kawhi Leonard is very interesting. I think that if Kawhi maybe had been here the year before and already had a relationship with Dwayne Casey, then I think that it might be a little different. But it's kind of a fresh start for both of them.
For both of them, yeah. And I love the quotes that came out of the early I think day one or day two, I think Nick Nurse was talking about how Kawhi was out there winning the one-on-one drill. Like, I guess they had like a pseudo one-on-one tournament and Kawhi won. And I'm like, I
No
like to hear
surprise.
that. You know what I mean? No surprise, but I liked hearing that he's going hard in practice, right? Like, he's ready. And the other thing too, while we were off, there were so many things, so many different storylines in terms of the Raptors hiring Kawhi's friend, but also Kawhi working out with
Yeah.
LeBron. And there were some whispers coming out of that workout that Kawhi was giving LeBron the business. Like, Kawhi is back to normal, right? I'm not rating what happened in a workout, but my point though of bringing it up is it sounds like he's healthy. Like, he is ready to
Well,
go
not only
on all
that, but
cylinders.
with a chip on his shoulder and something to prove. I mean, really, when you
Hell
think about it,
yes.
Kawhi was dragged through the mud for a whole NBA season. I
Totally.
mean, this
Totally true.
the media like looked at this as completely Kawhi's fault, as he was the weak one in this relationship, and how could he be the one? And the mistakes that he's made, and the people that he surrounds himself with. So I think again, with this fresh start, with a new coach and a new team, I wouldn't be shocked if Kawhi comes out and just starts kicking ass.
Yeah, no, totally agree. The other thing to come out early from this not media day, but Raptors training camp, sorry, in Vancouver, has been Kyle Lowry. And so we didn't hear from, or I guess the first time we heard from Kyle Lowry after the trade was at USA camp. And he didn't really want to get into talking about the trade. He just kind of said DeMar was his boy and kind of left it at that. Media day, I thought he handled it pretty well, right? He said everything you'd want him to
Yeah.
say. He's here to work and he's here to show out. But now that training camp started, it's been 2 days and Kyle Lowry hasn't talked to the media. Is this a thing? Are you worried about that at all? There's also a picture of Kyle wearing a hat, and mind you, it's a flashy hat, it's a nice hat. But on the side there was a quote that said 1 year. Are you worried about Kyle Lowry at all
What
from any of this stuff or no?
What is with Kyle's message hats? Remember after he got in trouble with the golf and he wore the Masters
Yeah.
hat?
Oh, yeah.
That was my favorite. This guy in his headwear sending messages. I like it. You know what? Not surprising that, like, honestly, like, bristly Kyle is back, and no surprise they traded his best friend on the team, and
Yeah.
I'm sure that he's got a little bit of chip on his shoulder, and again, like Kawhi, something to prove now as well,
Yes.
especially if he wants if he wants to pursue different opportunities than with the Raptors. Then, oh my goodness, they're throwing a fake punt. Sorry. Oh, that was
right.
terrible fake punt. We're recording it on Thursday. There's Thursday football on. So
Hey,
what?
Webby, we're sports
Yeah,
fans. That's
exactly.
allowed, man.
So I think that Kyle definitely has something to prove here, especially early in the season. So he's probably doing that 0-30 thing that LeBron does. Like, let's not talk to the media and get real fired up for the beginning of the season.
Here's the thing, right? And I get Kyle Lowry is super salty. I think that, he's super salty, but I understand why he's super salty. As you mentioned, they traded away his friend, right? And I get it. And I understand that he's going to be upset about that. And I don't even blame him for not really wanting to talk about it at USA Basketball. And again, I'm going to point to Kyle at Media Day. He was just saying he's here to work. He said he's not really the guy who is in the media or on Instagram or whatever or talkative much during the off season, right? Like, that's not him. So I understand that. But he's here to work. Kyle's going to ball. And plus he knows, like, they have Fred and DeLon behind him. So it's not like he can slack. Like, they don't have to play Kyle
Right.
Lowry. You know what I mean? Like, there's guys behind him to push him. And he's a pit bull. He's going to ball. Like,
He's
that's just
competitive.
Kyle Lowry, And I'm not going to be mad at him for being upset they traded DeMar DeRozan. I'm not going to be mad at him for that.
He's human.
And if we want guys to be real and be honest, but then that's only based off if we agree with their opinion. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's not really fair. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, if we want him to be honest and he's giving you honesty, what more do you want? And him not talking to the media at training camp, I get it, man. Like, you can only be asked the same question so many different times, right? Like, how's it playing with Kawhi? You know what I mean? Like, what's the chemistry been like? How different is it playing with Kawhi than playing with DeMar? Like, the same question the media is going to ask you every single time. So, to be honest, I don't mind if he doesn't talk.
No, like I say, not that I would rather him not talk, but him not talking shows me that There's no messing around. It's no jokes or anything. He's coming.
It's business.
Yeah, it's business time.
Also, too, I come from the school of, hey, if you ball, you can do whatever you want. Right?
That's it.
Ball out. If you ball, do whatever you want. And so if I'm okay with Kawhi coming here and not talking and Kawhi's going to ball, then I have to have the same rules for Kyle Lowry, right?
100%.
And, you know, who's going to be the leader of the team, who's the guy in the locker room, all that stuff we don't really know anyways. We don't know if Kyle and DeMar were these great leaders inside the locker room. We don't know that, right? So going forward, does Kyle now have to be the guy in the room because DeMar's not there? Well, again, we don't know that. Leaders will emerge. There's still a lot of good vets on this team. You got CJ Miles, who had some pretty good quotes today when he was talking about just the whole Lowry and DeRozan situation, which I thought was pretty interesting, right? Like he was just talking about Kyle being a professional, and he's not worried about Kyle. Kyle's going to be on the court and give it his all, like as you like to bring up all the time. That's that Philly mentality,
That's
right? He's going to go hard. I'm not really worried about Kyle Lowry because, again, there's people pushing him from behind, and the Raptors have a good team. Who doesn't want to play on a good team?
Right? That's it. You want to get traded to Atlanta? Like, just go for it later.